Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can. No,
oh, wait,
not yet. Actually. Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So a few things to cover at the start. So what we're looking at here is the thick client. So SQL Sentry essentially has three components. The first one is the monitoring service. So if we come into my default site, monitoring service, this service will typically run as a Windows admin and a sysadmin. What it does is it goes out to your targets, collects the information from your targets, and sends that information back to the SQL Sentry database. So the SQL Sentry repository database is the second component of the install. This is a SQL Server database sitting in your environment. Both the service and the database can sit entirely separate of each other and don't have to sit on any of the machines you're looking to monitor. So we do expect about a 2 to 3% resource utilization on your targets. Okay. And then the last thing is the thick client that we're looking at here. So we also do have a web version of this as well. So that is a thing most people are also interested in. Also, just some additional information on this particular monitoring service. One monitoring service can get you to about 60, 70 targets without performance issues. It is agentless. So again, very lightweight trace. Most customers will use two monitoring services. The reason for this being is if you have two services, one that will provide automatic load balancing and you will get fault tolerance. So if one service was to go down, the second service would continue to collect that data for your environment and alert you on the second one going down. Okay. We can add our targets pretty straightforward. All we have to do is we can build out our own sites. Right now I have a default site. You can build out your own custom groups. And if I right click on my group, right click, add, and then I can choose the target I wish to add. So let's go SQL Server. Here I'll give the name of the target, provide the instance name. If it's a default instance, leave it blank. If it runs on anything other than the default port of 1433, I can specify that here. Hit connect. That monitoring service will reach out to my target, go through this checklist. Then I will hit next, 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 and then you will see it start to add in the navigator on the left, something like this here. Okay. Okay, so once you've added your target, what it will start to do is evaluate against our conditions. We've got about 85 built-in conditions. So once that target starts to evaluate, we start to see it populate here on the start screen. So this is our start page. This is kind of like our one dashboard for viewing your overall health for your whole environment. So do know also in the web portal, you can get an overall health score of individual instances. And in the thick client, we get the overall, so the health score of all my targets in my whole environment. So right now, my health score is 62. It's 0 from 100, 100 being the best. And this is everything that has been triggered in the last 24 hours. So I can actually come in here and change my time frame from 24 to 12 hours. And I will see all the conditions that my target is evaluated against in those 12 hours. So for example, I can come in here. I can see the name of my target that's been affected, the type, the condition that was triggered, the count, and the severity. If I want to investigate more, I can actually come in here, click on my SQL Server deadlock condition that has triggered for London SQL 01. Here I get the full message down below, the description of what was triggered. Again, the name, the type, the condition, the start time, end time, duration, and state. Okay. So this is a very easy, nice way to be proactive about your environment health. So to have a look at those 85 conditions that we're evaluating against, if we come into the conditions list on the right here or the left here, if I double click conditions list, this is going to show me all the conditions out of the box from SQL Sentry. So if we pick one as an example, percentage free disk space. So down below is the query that's querying against my repository database. And it's showing me I have an explicit value of 10 and a quick description on the right. So this particular condition is a repository query that returns all disks on all monitored servers with less than 10% free space. So once I have less than 10% free space, send me an alert. Okay. We can also edit these conditions. So if you want to modify the query or you want to modify the value, you can do. Do note it will create a copy, so don't worry about modifying it beyond recognition or breaking it, you have full reign of that, so you won't lose the original. If for any example, there is a particular condition you wish to get evaluated on, but you can't see it here, you can create your own custom advisory condition. So if we come in here, create custom advisory condition, SQL Server. Here we can give it a name, a description, default evaluation frequency. So how often is it going to go up and check that value? A few other options here. And here we can essentially start to build it out. So if I just create a really basic one, and let's do a specific value. So here I'll provide the database, the query, and the value I wish to get evaluated on. So as long as we are storing and holding that metric within the repository database, you can essentially build out your own custom condition. Okay. For some of the more complex conditions, we do provide links to blog posts that some of our internal staff have written, and you will see some links to some Microsoft documentation and SQL skills as well. Okay. So again, once we add our target, it will evaluate against these conditions, and then we can have multiple different actions against those conditions. So to view the multiple different actions, if we come up, view, conditions, here we can see they're broken into 4 different categories. So general, fail-safe, audit, and advisory. If I actually just stick to the same one, so percentage-free disk space, here I can see the different actions against that condition that I've selected. Okay, so if I hit add, and I want to add another action against that particular condition, if I hit global, it seems to be a little bit unresponsive. Just check the thing. Just give me 2 seconds. It looks like the connection dropped between me and the server. I'll share my screen again. Apologies about that. Okay, so here we can see my multiple different actions against my particular condition. So if I want to add a new action, if I click add, presented with this additional window. If I expand, I know myself it's under global, percentage-free disk space. So here I have my multiple different actions that I can assign against that condition. So once I hit that 10%, less than 10% free space, I can execute a job, execute PowerShell, execute process, and execute SQL. So these 4 guys, incredibly powerful, depending on your scripting abilities, okay? Then we have some more internal ones, but then also the send email and the send SNMP trap. So send email, pretty straightforward, but then SNMP trap, also very useful for the integration into third-party applications. So maybe a ticketing system that supports it, Teams or something like that that you wish to get notified into, okay? So if I just pick one as an example, let's just do another send email. So again, you can see multiple different actions against the same condition. Down below is the action settings of the particular action that we've selected. So I can select the user I wish to receive the alert, or I can break it out into different groups. I also have my rule sets. So maybe, for example, if I hit new, I can have account based. So make sure, let's say I always use high CPU as an example. So if it spikes at about 100%, maybe it's not something we want to be notified on, but if it spikes at 100% multiple times within a certain length of time, then send me an alert. Or we also have time-based. So if it spikes at 100% for half a second or a second, 5 seconds, maybe not a big deal, but if it spikes at 100% for more than 2 minutes, then send me an alert, okay? We can also get quite granular with these different actions and conditions. So right now I'm setting this action on this condition at all targets. I can do it per site. I can do it per group. And I can also do it per instance. Okay, so we can get incredibly granular on how we want to set these actions against these particular conditions. Once you get this granular, it does become explicit, so you can just add it this way. So I'll just do one for an example for you guys, and you'll see that add then explicit action. To delete, just straightforward enough. Okay. Okay, so let's jump back. Okay, so now let's open up the performance dashboard of my particular instance. So if we come to my instance, right click, open, performance analysis. Okay, so here is my dashboard data. So my Windows metrics on the left, my SQL Server on the right, and here I can get a good comparison of where an issue may lie. So at a glance, I can actually see on my CPU usage, this solid green color is other CPU usage. So if I hover over, I should be able to catch that. And the teal color is my CPU usage by SQL Server. Okay, so let's say hypothetically, I had a situation where my CPU was maxing out with that solid green color. I would know that it was not a process on that machine. What I can do is I can actually highlight the area of performance that's spiking. I can actually correlate that performance spike then across my environment and associate it with any other performance issues. And if it was another process, I can right click and you'll see this functionality through the tool, but I can then jump to processes. And now I can have a look at all the other processes that were running on that machine for that time slice that I've selected. So if we had a hypothetical situation with that green solid spike, I could see maybe if there was an antivirus running, or maybe somebody had installed another application on that machine that could have been stealing and consuming resources away from SQL Server. Okay. We can also jump back and look at historical data on my graph, and we can select our time frame and we can hit go. If I can move this bar here, we can actually click live play button and look at live data collection. We can also see these warning signs throughout my graphs. Again, if I just click on that, what this is these are the conditions that we spoke about earlier. And it's just a nice way to view the conditions that have been triggered on top of my graphs. So this particular guy here, high average wait time per usage session, that quick description, severity, start time, end time, and duration. And we can see I have one of two records. And we can actually see I can go through these and it will highlight underneath which particular condition it's speaking about. So if I go to the second one, it should highlight this guy here. Okay. Okay, let's say we have a spike in this teal color. We want to troubleshoot that performance issue from SQL Server. Again, we can right click, jump to top SQL. Now we're looking at all the top SQL queries that I have collected for that time period. Okay, so as I go through these, and just enlarge these bottom graphs for you. So as I go through my queries here I can see the statements within the queries. Here I can see the plan diagram, and below is the query history. So this plan diagram uses Plan Explorer, which is our free query optimization tool. We open with Plan Explorer. Here we can see the full plan. So again, in a production environment, it could be quite large. So what we could do is we can actually jump into top operations, maybe select the top operation that we're most interested in, jump back to our plan diagram. We now see that highlighted for us. If we hover over, we're going to get more information. But what we can also do is right click. We can adjust the cost by IO, CPU, CPU plus IO, or line width by from rows to data size. If I adjust that, we'll see that change up throughout my plan diagram. If I jump back to my top SQL, and just expand this for you again. So here at the bottom is our full query history. So each of these teal dots represents an execution of this particular query. So here we start to see the level of granularity that SQL Sentry has over other tools. So I can hover over each of these executions. I can see the duration, the CPU, the reads, the writes, the start time, end time. And if a different color dot was here represented, it might indicate that a bad plan was cached. So what we can do is we can actually, again, right click on each of these teal dots. I can open the plan of each of these individual executions and maybe do a plan diagram comparison. What I can also do is right click, jump to, and maybe jump to dashboard to have a look at the impact of performance of that particular execution of that query. If I come down the bottom here, I can change my grouping. So I can change it by hour. day or week. And actually, if I have a look at my day one, and I can expand my range here, I can actually see how this particular query is trending over time. So is it trending up or is it trending down? I can adjust my metric here. So duration to CPU and IO. So again, depending on what I'm troubleshooting. Okay, let's bring this down. And let's actually jump to live data, most recent data collection. So if I hit this play button, and now I'm looking at all the most recent data collected. We can also actually see running queries as well. So again, a live running query as it's happening, I can right click, kill process. What that will do, that will actually kill that process using the user I'm currently logged in as and not the monitoring service user. So it avoids kind of any elevated permissions. If I jump back to my completed queries, again, I only have 48, but in a production, you might have thousands. So what you can actually do is you can actually group this data, or we can actually filter it. So maybe we want to filter by what has the most resource intensive query first. So we can bubble up the most relevant information. So maybe I'm seeing performance impact. Maybe it could be a situation where it's that one smoking gun scenario or that big heavy hitter query that's impacting performance across my environment. I can right click, jump to dashboard, and I can see the impact of that particular query now represented across my dashboard. And I can associate him with any spikes in performance across my environment. So I can see the start time, the end time, and I highlighted the length that it ran with that purple line. If I jump back, maybe it isn't that kind of situation. Maybe it is a scenario of a death of 1,000 cuts where we have that one fast running query running hundreds, if not thousands of times that's impacting performance. So very hard to identify. What I can do is I can come up here, I can click show totals. Now I can see how many times these particular queries ran individually, but I can also now see the total impact. So I can see the total duration of all these together, total CPU, total reads, total writes, and the count here. Okay, so helps me identify a death of 1,000 cut scenario. If I untick that show totals, maybe it's a situation where I want to sift through my data. What I can do is I can actually group all my queries. So maybe I want to filter everything by application. I can do. Maybe I want to filter by application and database. So now I'm grouping all my queries by application and database, okay? Just to make sure we're bubbling up and looking at the most relevant information. And again, we can get as granular as we need to with that, okay? So now we're looking at application by database, by duration, by login, okay? Just to reset that, all we have to do is bring that back. And there we go. Quick thing to note as well, just for once you're in all these tabs, you can come up, go view settings to adjust the settings for the different tabs. Right now in Top SQL, just to note, we do collect everything that runs faster than 5 seconds. If it is for any reason you want to drop that down, you can do, but just do note, the lower you drop the threshold collection settings, the more data you collect, the larger the repository can grow, okay? Okay, so let's jump quickly maybe into some blocking. Okay, so here we can actually expand our blocks. We can see the SPIDs. We can see the start time, duration. We can open the plan. We can see the statement, the wait time, the wait type, the wait resource. We can see the host, the application, the database, and the login. We can also see down below is my full text data. By default, this truncates out about 10,000 characters, but if we come into my global settings, we can actually, if we jump into advanced, we can actually increase that query collection maximum text length to about 50,000 characters. And here you can actually manage some of the storage settings as well. So for granular data, this key performance history guy is kind of the key one to keep an eye on. By default, we have it set at 15 days. So this guy is responsible for Top SQL blocking, deadlock, and TempDB session data as well. Okay. Do note on your blocks as well, right click, jump to, and again, we can jump to anywhere in the tool to investigate that particular block. For deadlocks, again, also just to note, on any of these tabs, we can jump back to start time and end time to look at historical data. So if I jump back, just to give you an example, Here I can look at the historical deadlocks, or if I hit play, it's going to bring me to my most recent. Let me just expand this for you guys. Okay, so here we're presented with a really nice deadlock diagram. So here we can actually, if we come down the bottom, we have this play dial. So if I hit play, it will actually bring me through the order in which each of the locks in the deadlock take place and help me identify which one is actually the victim. So as we walk through this, I can see number 1 here on SPID 56 from London SQL 01 took an objects lock on the rainfall rates table. I can see the second thing here, an exclusive lock on SPID 70, took a row ID lock on the consumptions rates table. And then we can say the dotted line here was an attempted lock, because as we play through the deadlock, the attempted lock always shows up as a dotted line rather than a solid line, meaning that it acquired the lock. Okay, so in the third situation we have here, we have that IX for intent exclusive. And then the fourth thing we say is on SPID 56, tried to take an update lock on the row ID, which was already grabbed on the consumptions rates table. So that gives us our deadlock. We can see that this is the guy that was killed. If we can identify that, it's highlighted in red. If I click on it, it's actually going to expand for us. So here we can see the waiters. We can identify that this is the code that was rolled back, again, as it's highlighted in red. What I can also do is expand my owners. And here I can actually do a comparison of the code to maybe identify, was it a code refactoring problem that could have caused this deadlock? Okay. Again, right click, jump to, and again, we can jump to anywhere else in the tool to kind of investigate that particular deadlock. Also, just to note, we have some additional functionality down the bottom here. So in this example I have, I'm using single threads. If you had a deadlock or query that went into parallel and started using more than one CPU thread, you would see multiple different lines from multiple different locks against the same SPID, and this can be incredibly hard to read. So what we can do is we can come down here, click the optimize layout button, and what it will do is revert it back as if it was single threaded, just to show less information, but to show the same kind of information and make it a lot easier to view and consume. Okay. If we take a quick look maybe at this space. So the disk space tab displays information about how the disks are being utilized. So this information is broken down by database and file. It includes metrics such as the auto growth setting and the number of VLFs. And the main function of the disk space tab is to identify disk space capacity issues. So understanding where your database files reside on the disk system, help you determine if disk space is being used optimally. It's broken into 3 sections. So we have the upper section, which is the graphical representation of the database at the disk level. Then the middle section is the grid view. And once we've drilled down, we can actually come down here and we can see the forecasted predicted space or disk exhaustion based on the usage history of that particular disk. Okay. If we come back, I'm just going to close down these tabs. And what I'm going to do is going to scroll up. If I go to my default site, right click and open always on management. So here we can view my always on environment. So again, I can right click on the site level, open. What we have here is our layout style, so we can adjust this. We also can zoom in and out depending on how large our environment is. And we can also see the WSFCs, so the Windows Server Failover Clusters. And we're presented with this nice graphical view of my always on environment. So it'll provide me with information such as if the replicas are synchronous versus asynchronous commit modes, replica health, log send, recovery queue, and we can also see up here the quorum vote as well. Okay, if we hover over this pipe, we can also see the amount of data that's been transferred. So depending on which node I've selected, the bottom view is the grids details or a combination of tabs and grids to allow us to see a high level and detailed level metrics. And then the final section on the top right here is the history area view. So we can have the charting tab, the error log tab, and the replica states changes tab. So the charting tab will just display data traffic between the replicas, as well as the log send recovery queue metrics according to the selected node. Of course, the error log, again, it will show us any always on health events that are classified as errors related to the selected node, and the same with the replica states changes. Okay. If we jump quickly to, if we take a quick look at the event calendar. So what we can do is, again, if we right click on our particular instance, open event calendar. Just give it a second to load up because it's gonna, there's quite a lot going on here. But what we can do, this is our Outlook style calendar. So again, we can jump through the time frame on the top left here. But what we can do is we can look at it from a 1 minute, 10 minute, 1 hour, and 4 hour view, and also a 1 day view. We can also view multiple days in the same tab here. So if I actually just do 2 days, just to give you guys an example. So just for comparison reasons. Okay, I'll jump back to 1 day. So here, everything in orange we can see is everything that has run. We can see everything that is scheduled to run. And we can actually drag and drop events that are scheduled to run in the future. Those events will automatically be rescheduled within SQL Server. We can also see how do we have any failures or any conflicts that have taken place that could lead to resource contention on the server. We can also, let's have a quick look, right click, jump to, choose maybe this guy here. So here we can actually right click, jump on any of the events we want to use the context jump to menu to look at the history of the event and jump to various tabs within the performance analysis as well. So we can start to troubleshoot performance issues directly from the event calendar. Quite a lot of information on one screen here. So what we can do if we come up to view, event calendar, event sources, here I can actually filter out to make my view more relevant to me. So maybe I want to see just deadlocks. I can select just deadlocks, apply filter. We can actually save this view as well. So if it is just deadlocks you're interested in, you can save this view. And again, we can just see all the deadlocks that ran on this machine. Again, right click, jump to, and maybe we want to jump to deadlocks. Okay. And if I come back here, jump back to Navigator, close this tab out. One thing to quickly note as well, reports within SQL Sentry. So we do have quite a lot of reports. So if I come up here, reports, performance analysis, here we can run reports based on performance, disk file space, top SQL, blocking, deadlocks, fragmentation manager. So maybe if I just want a Windows Plus server performance report, for an example. So my start time, end time, the particular server I wish to run that report on, hit OK. And that will load my report for me. Expand that. We can also export that. So you can save it as Excel, PDF, or Word. So you can attach it as an email and send it to whoever you need to. Okay. Awesome. I know that's probably quite a lot of information for one day, so I might leave it there. And thank you very much for paying attention.